I want you to pause for a moment and picture the scene. A city already on edge, federal agents in the streets, a vehicle surging forward, gunfire, and within hours, a story hardens into moral certainty. 2 people, we're told, were shot. A married couple, victims of federal brutality, proof once again that America has lost its way. But then another narrative emerges. Names, records, allegations, gang ties, prior arrests, a vehicle allegedly turned into a weapon. And suddenly, the question is no longer what happened. The question becomes, who do we believe? This is not just about Portland. It's not even just about immigration. It is about something deeper, something far more destabilizing. In modern America, power no longer rests solely in institutions. It rests in narratives. If you care about how facts fracture, how trust collapses, and how democracies drift, stay with me. Because what comes next explains why this keeps happening. And to understand that, we have to step back, much further back. Let's be precise about what this moment represents. At the surface, this is a dispute over an incident. A CBP agent fires his weapon. 2 people are injured. Officials say it was self-defense. Local leaders say it was reckless force. But underneath that disagreement is something far more consequential. We are watching the breakdown of a shared operating system for truth. The Department of Homeland Security presents names, timelines, immigration records, alleged gang affiliations. Democratic officials respond not by contesting each detail, but by contesting credibility itself. We can no longer take them at their word. That sentence matters more than any press release. Because once trust in federal institutions collapses, facts stop functioning as referees. They become weapons. Each side selects, amplifies, and moralizes. The result is predictable. Outrage accelerates. Protests erupt. Every incident is immediately nationalized. This is how local events become symbols in a larger war over legitimacy. To understand why this pattern feels so familiar and why it keeps repeating, we need to look at the deeper forces that shaped it. That story begins long before Portland. To see how we arrived here, you have to rewind the clock. For decades, immigration enforcement in the United States operated largely out of public view. Bureaucratic, technical, slow. Disputed, yes, but rarely cinematic. That changed as immigration became a defining cultural fault line. Policy turned into identity. Enforcement turned into symbolism. Administrations began governing not just through law, but through signal. Who is released? Who is detained? Who is blamed? At the same time, trust in national institutions eroded. Not all at once, but steadily. War, financial crises, political polarization. Each episode chipped away at a shared sense of authority. Into that vacuum stepped social media. Events no longer unfolded, they detonated. A single incident could be framed, moralized, and mobilized within minutes. So when federal agents appear in a city like Portland, they do not arrive as neutral enforcers. They arrive carrying decades of accumulated suspicion. Every action is pre-interpreted, every outcome prejudged. This is the historical machinery behind today's outrage. And once it's set in motion, it only needs a spark. And in Portland, that spark came fast. A traffic stop, agents identifying themselves, a vehicle lurching forward. According to federal authorities, that car was no longer transportation. It was a weapon. The agent fires. 2 people are hit. They flee. They are later found, treated, hospitalized. Within hours, the details fragment. One version spreads first. 2 innocent people, a married couple, shot by federal agents in broad daylight. Outrage follows the narrative. Protests ignite. Elected officials demand investigations. Calls to halt federal operations echo through the city. Then comes the counterstrike. Names released, immigration histories detailed. Alleged gang affiliations revealed, a suspected foreign criminal organization enters the story. And suddenly, the moral certainty collapses. This is the first crisis point, not because of the shooting itself, but because of what happens after. The public is forced to choose between narratives before facts can breathe. If you've ever wondered why emotions outrun evidence in moments like this, you're not alone. It's happening by design, because once the story hardens, the system takes over. And that system is far more powerful than any single incident. What we are really confronting now is the hidden machinery beneath the headlines. In moments like this, the fight is not over facts, it is over frames. Institutions like DHS operate inside a legal logic. They document, they categorize, they assign status: legal, illegal, suspect, removed. Political leaders, by contrast, operate inside a moral logic. They speak of fear, families, communities, values. Neither system is accidental. Both are coherent, but they are incompatible. When DHS labels individuals as criminal, illegal aliens, or suspected gang members, it is asserting state authority. When local leaders reject that account outright, they are asserting moral sovereignty. This is how governance fractures. Each side speaks to a different audience, using a different language, guided by a different definition of legitimacy. And social media ensures there is no neutral ground in between. Once an event enters this system, escalation is automatic. Evidence becomes secondary. Emotion becomes accelerant. The mechanism feeds on repetition. Incident, outrage, protest, counterclaims, then silence until the next spark. And there will always be a next spark, because the system is no longer designed to de-escalate. It is designed to perform, and that brings us to the second breaking point, when performance turns into pressure. The pressure builds quietly until it doesn't. After Portland, the pattern repeats with unnerving speed. Another confrontation, another vehicle, another agent claiming self-defense, this time Minneapolis. This time, someone dies. Again, the facts are contested before they are processed. Federal authorities say an agent's life was threatened. Protesters say enforcement itself is the provocation. What matters is not which account you believe. What matters is that belief now precedes investigation. Each new incident amplifies the last. Portland primes Minneapolis. Minneapolis radicalizes Portland. Local outrage becomes national symbolism. Federal agents are no longer seen as enforcers of law. They are seen as avatars of a presidency, a party, an ideology. And that makes every encounter combustible. This is the second crisis point. Not a single tragedy, but a cascading one. Because once enforcement is politicized, restraint looks like weakness, and force looks like intent. Every action is interpreted through the worst possible lens. The system tightens. Agents feel cornered. Communities feel occupied. And in that compression, ordinary people, people who never asked to be part of a national drama, are pulled directly into its path. That's where the real cost begins to show. Now, let me bring this closer to you, because while institutions argue and narratives clash, you live with the consequences. If you're a resident of these cities, you feel the tension before a single shot is fired. Helicopters overhead, sirens at night, protests that shut down streets you use to get home. If you're an immigrant, documented or not, you feel something deeper. Uncertainty, fear of misinterpretation, fear that one wrong moment can spiral beyond control. If you're a federal agent, you carry a different weight. Split-second decisions, hostile crowds, the knowledge that whatever you do will be replayed, reframed, and judged forever. This is how polarization stops being abstract. It enters daily life. And here's the uncomfortable truth. No narrative fully captures this human cost. Not the language of law enforcement, not the language of protest. If this conversation matters to you, if you want to understand why ordinary people keep getting trapped in extraordinary conflict, stay with me. Share this. Talk about it. Because the personal is now inseparable from the political. And what happens next doesn't stop at city limits. What begins in one city rarely stays there. In a globalized media environment, local enforcement incidents reverberate far beyond state lines. Images travel faster than investigations. Statements outrun subpoenas. Foreign governments watch these moments closely. So do transnational criminal networks. So do allies who once looked to the United States as a model of institutional coherence. When America appears unable to agree on basic facts, its moral authority weakens. When federal power clashes publicly with local leadership, governance looks fragmented. And when protests erupt nationwide, the signal sent abroad is instability. This is not abstract geopolitics. It shapes real behavior. Migration flows respond to perceived enforcement weakness or chaos. Criminal organizations test boundaries when signals are mixed. Adversaries exploit internal division to amplify distrust through information warfare. What looks like a domestic dispute becomes a strategic vulnerability. The Portland shooting is discussed not just in city council meetings, but in foreign intelligence briefings and digital propaganda channels. Every contradiction is magnified. Every misstep archived. In the modern world, credibility is currency. And once spent, it is extraordinarily difficult to reclaim. Which brings us to the hardest question of all. Where does this trajectory lead and what comes next? So let's talk about the future, not as prediction, but as possibility. There are three paths ahead. The first is the optimistic one. Institutions relearn restraint. Investigations slow the narrative cycle. Facts regain authority not because everyone agrees, but because procedures are trusted again. Federal and local leaders stop speaking past each other and start sharing responsibility. In this scenario, incidents still occur, but they no longer metastasize into national crises. The second path is more likely managed instability. Shootings are investigated, reports are issued, but trust is never fully restored. Each side accepts a permanent low-grade conflict punctuated by periodic outrage. The system holds, but just barely. Then there is the third path, the dangerous one. Narratives completely replace institutions. Every enforcement action is presumed illegitimate. Every protest is presumed lawless. Agents act defensively. Communities radicalize preemptively. Violence becomes normalized not as intent, but as expectation. History tells us something important here. Democracies don't collapse when laws disappear. They collapse when belief does. And once belief is gone, rebuilding it takes a generation. Which leaves us with one final question. What, if anything, can still be done? Let me leave you with this. The most dangerous thing happening in America today is not a single policy or a single president or a single shooting. It is the quiet disappearance of a shared reality. When every incident is immediately sorted into moral tribes, truth loses its power to calm. It can only inflame, and when that happens, force real or perceived fills the vacuum. The Portland case will be investigated, statements will be clarified, protests will fade, another city will take its place. That is not the crisis. That is the symptom. The real question is whether a democracy can survive when no referee is trusted and every institution is assumed guilty before it speaks. You don't have to agree with DHS. You don't have to agree with local leaders, but you should be deeply worried about a country where disagreement begins with disbelief. If this analysis helped you see the system behind the story, share it, talk about it, challenge it, because the future of democratic stability won't be decided only by elections or enforcement, but by whether citizens like you still believe facts matter. And in the next video, I want to explore one question that follows naturally from this moment. What happens when belief itself becomes partisan?